Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Animas Corporation, providing insulin delivery products for people living with diabetes and part of the One Touch family. And by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes with the world's first continuous glucose monitoring system that sends glucose readings directly to your compatible smart device. Live life on your own terms with Dexcom. Hi, it's Stacey. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. I'm not a doctor. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, a research presentation from JDRF's Tom Brobson. He focuses on stem cell research and the Artificial Pancreas Project. Tom has type 1, and he's been in several different clinical trials.
Not only is it available, but the elements of it are becoming more and more available and fully reimbursed and covered by insurance. So this is one of JDRF's big objectives, and we've accomplished it. And there are next generation systems already in the wings moving forward.
You'll hear a talk Tom gave at a recent JDRF event in my area. I recorded it as he presented it. Plus, JDRF walks and events are a great way to meet other people touched by type 1. I caught up with one family in Naples whose team name is the Average Bros, but you'll find out they are anything but average. It all starts now on Diabetes Connections. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I'm Stacey Sims. Glad to have you along. If you're new to the show, what we try to do here is inspire and educate about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connection, highlighting, really cool stories of people who are doing amazing things living with type 1, but also bringing you experiences from people who are not in the Iditarod or, racing around the Arctic, but are just living day to day with type 1. I also try to bring you news from the technology and healthcare companies that we deal with, all sorts of cool stuff like that. My son was diagnosed right before he turned 2. He is now 12, so that was just over 10 years ago. And my background is in broadcasting. I spent my entire career in local TV and radio news. So here we are now with a diabetes podcast. And thank you so much as you listen. Just want to say, man, this year has been wild. Out of the gate, we've had some incredible numbers. The show is really growing, and I know that's because you're telling people about it. So thank you so much. Word of mouth is the best way to tell people about this podcast or any podcast. Sometimes you have to teach them what a podcast is. And I really appreciate it because, frankly, I started the show because I wanted more information in this format. As I said, I worked in radio for many years, love radio. This is where I feel most at home. And I hope as you listen, you do too. All right, so I mentioned the Iditarod and racing around the Arctic. And I did that on purpose because the Iditarod started on March 5th. It is most likely finished. But did you know there is a participant this year in the Iditarod who has type 1 diabetes? Yeah, Charlie Benja. This is not his first Iditarod. In fact, he's not the first guy with type 1 to compete. Bruce Linton finished 6 Iditarod races. I mean, the Iditarod is this, 1,000 miles across the Alaska tundra, sled dogs, and it is absolutely incredible, the hardship and the deprivation, the sleep deprivation, the sensory deprivation, the freezing cold that these guys go through. But yeah, so apparently Charlie was inspired by Bruce many years ago, and he participated in Bruce Linton's ceremonial start it was a ceremonial start for Charlie. It wasn't for Bruce back in 2007. So I'm going to link up more information on both those guys at diabetes-connections.com. As I said, the Iditarod is most likely finished as this show is airing for the first time, but we wish Charlie the very best. And also going on is this other nutso race called the 6633 Arctic Ultra. Now, this started on March 10th, and I've talked about this before because Roddy Riddle, who is an ultra athlete with type 1 diabetes, is making his second attempt in the 6633 Ultra. And this is called the toughest, coldest, windiest ultra-distance foot race on the planet. And I describe this as the Iditarod, but you're the dog. It's just you and a little wagon, a little thing that you pull behind you, a sled with all your gear and provisions for the race. And man, it's crazy. I mean, how do you describe this? This is a 350-mile race. And, you know, they have medical help standing by. Not everybody finishes. But we are certainly cheering on Roddy Riddle. And I will link up at diabetes-connections.com a way that you can follow him along the route of the race. I wish him the very best. Tough enough to do this one without type 1 diabetes, same as the Iditarod. Man, it's hard to imagine. And Roddy wears an Animas pump and the Dexcom CGM. When we talked to him last year, he said he can't imagine doing the race without those. So perfect time to give you a quick word from our sponsor, from Animas. We started using an Animas insulin pump nearly 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years this summer. We started pumping with Animas. I love their products. Customer service is second to none. And Animas offers a choice of insulin pumps, so you can choose the pump that best suits each individual, and in our case, family's unique needs. I love working with Animas. I am thrilled they jumped right on board with this podcast. Find out more about their products at diabetes-connections.com and click on the Animas, part of the One Touch family logo. One of the toughest parts of diabetes management for us, for my son, has always been the pump inset. You know, he went on a pump 6 months after diagnosis. He was 2.5. And he has never liked, I don't know that anybody likes it, but he was always very stressed out about doing the inset. Even when he said, yeah, it doesn't hurt that badly, it just was this big source of stress. When he was 2, 3, 4 years old, it would take us, half an hour to do this. And it's just so tough for some kids. I know some kids just, pop it on, no problem, ready to go. He was never like that. And we tried a bunch of different insets and it didn't really matter. It was just one of those things that it's very difficult for him. Over the years, it definitely got better. We started using numbing cream. There are a few different kinds. You can ask your endocrinologist about using something like that. A lot of people use a cold spoon, or just ice the area. Just please be careful and put a towel or paper towel between your skin and the ice. You don't want to put it directly on, of course. But I'll tell you what we found recently that has made a huge difference. And I wish I'd found this years ago because it really hasn't been a problem for a while. I mean, he's 12. He does just about everything himself now. I mean, I have to remind him, trust me. But it's no longer a question of chasing him down to make him do the inset. He does it himself. But we read an article about coughing, tricking the brain into providing pain relief or not feeling the pain in the first place. And we laughed and we thought, well, that's kind of weird. But he said, okay, I'll try it. And he says it really works. So at the moment when you insert the needle, and we use the Animas insets, so that's the round inserter, if you've ever seen it, looks kind of like a spaceship. And then you press the sides, and when you press the sides, you cough. And he says it doesn't hurt at all. Now, the warning on this one, and the reason why they probably don't want you doing it at doctor's offices and why the nurse doesn't tell you to do this when you're getting your flu shot, that sort of thing, is because if you are not the person doing the shot or the inset, the other person who's coughing can move, right? So, that can be a problem for somebody giving an injection with a pen or with a syringe, that sort of thing. But I think, if you're a parent and you're giving your kid an injection or doing an inset, you can probably have them cough and they won't move too much. And certainly if you're doing this yourself, you may want to give it a try. I will link up, I'm not kidding, there is medical literature on this. I will link it up at diabetes-connections.com. You can read for yourself. Yeah, where did they come up with this stuff? I mean, and who figured this out? But I'll link it up and you can try it out. All right, Tom Brobson coming up. Quick word about Dexcom. When Benny was younger, he was totally out there sharing about his diabetes, right? Little kids are like that. He would check or dose in class or during sports, pull out all the kit, everything. But like a lot of middle school kids, he is getting more private. And I was surprised to see how much the Dexcom is helping with that. Being able to discreetly check the display on his smart device or the Dexcom receiver is a lot less cumbersome than getting out all the gear to finger stick. The Dexcom G5 Mobile Continuous Glucose Monitoring System is the first FDA-approved device to let you make treatment decisions without pricking your finger. CGM-based treatment requires finger sticks for calibration, may result in hypoglycemia if calibration not performed or symptoms expectations do not match CGM readings. For more information, go to Dexcom.com. My guest today is someone I've heard speak many times. He's always got something exciting to say. Tom Brobson's official title is National Director of Research Investment Opportunities. I think that translates as Big Poobah fundraiser, but he's spent the last few years taking part in artificial pancreas trials and talking about the progress that's been made. It really is incredible, especially when you talk to somebody like Tom. He was diagnosed with type 1 as an adult. And the first time he took part in these trials, and he'll talk about this, they hooked him up in the hospital, and it really was a hookup. He had to stay in the hospital attached by these wires while the whole thing worked. And as Medtronic gets ready to roll out the first commercial version of an almost artificial pancreas, they call it a hybrid closed loop, I thought this would be a good time to look at what JDRF is talking about. You may not know, and I'll let Tom explain it more, but JDRF funded the beginning of all of this artificial pancreas research, and they have helped each step of the way. As you'll hear, I recorded this interview while Tom was giving a presentation in my town. It's a noisy restaurant, but you can hear him just fine. There is some silverware clinking in the background. Maybe you could have lunch while you listen. You'll feel right at home. Here's Tom Brobson speaking in Huntersville, North Carolina in February 2017.
I do want to, I want to sort of have some good energy and kind of go where you guys want to go, because this is a small enough group that I think I can probably, instead of just trying to necessarily go through a real formal discussion, I can kind of take questions or things that you guys want to hear more about and do my best to tell you about them. And that doesn't necessarily even have to include something specific to JDRF's research agenda, right? It can be whatever topic you've wondered about. We said we had a new family here with a new diagnosis. I have type 1 diabetes. I have a lot of technology on me right this very minute. Nobody strike a match. Hard to know what might happen. So before I get started, let me ask a few questions. So we had a new diagnosis family right here, I think I heard. How many other type 1s are here in the room right now? How many other people with type 1? There's at least one person, right? So really just two of us in the room right now that have type 1. That's so that we're not well represented. And so how many are what they call the traditional type 3s, the people who don't actually live with type 1 but live with type 1 because they're helping take care of people with, right? Yeah, lots of, so that's where everyone is. That's good. What would you guys like to hear about? What are some of the key topics that you'd like to hear about today? And I'll try to make sure I touch on them.
Hear about your experience with the artificial pancreas.
So artificial pancreas, that'll be an easy one, hopefully, if the sound holds out. And any other topics? So the stem cell research. So, and which is some really interesting things. Do you have anything in particular you want to hear on that topic? Just sort of the work that we're doing and how that's going to Okay, so I'm glad to talk about all of those things. I'll start with artificial pancreas because there's been some remarkable advances there. And I'll start first by saying what an artificial pancreas is. So artificial pancreas is something. It's just technology. It's all the things I have on my body right this minute. So it's an insulin pump. It's a continuous glucose sensor, right, that's continuously monitoring my blood sugar. And then it's a brain of some sort. The brain can be in the pump. The brain can be in a phone, right? Phones are just portable computers. And it's an algorithm. That's a computer program running in that brain that integrates the sensor and the pump, and then helps to start keeping you, with some help, automatically in a good zone with your blood sugars, right? So, have lots of parents here of type 1s. How many mornings can you wake up your child, and every single morning they wake up at, say, 100? Morning after morning after morning. How many times can you say that you can get them to be within 25% of where you wish they were day after day, like between 100 and 125, right? The ability to do consistent performance of this complex system that we call the body is really hard, right? I know that I can wake up any given morning and who knows where I'm going to be, right? Like last night about 4 o'clock in the morning, I was too low and my sensor was going off and I was having to eat something, right? So we know that it's very hard to control our type 1. And something that the artificial pancreas is attempting to do is bring some brains to the outfit and to help start making the management of type 1 easier, right? So this stuff isn't yet what we think of as being a full cure, but it's going to the point Stacey made earlier, really trying to make our lives easier now, the burden of living with type 1 lower, our outcomes better, right? It's an interesting thing, and I'm a little bit of a sidebar here. If we do surveys of all y'all, of type 1 parents, what is it that you're most what you want to see happen? It's pretty easy that the parents will always say, we want the cure. But if you ask the type 1s living with the disease, they'll just say, I'll take anything that makes it just a little bit easier, right? And that's kind of a duality there. There's these two different things. How do we improve our lives and make things easier now with something like the artificial pancreas, and how do we get to the cure? Because we only have so much money, right? And my answer is, I don't want to have to choose between one or the other. I want to have both, right? None of us should get to choose. We should be able to keep working on things like the cure while driving things right now that will improve my quality of life and improve my ability to control my blood sugars and wake me up in the middle of the night so I eat a snack instead of finding out that I have to have an emergency room visit because I slept through a bad low. So this is kind of the interesting point. And where does the walk come in at Davidson? Because it's through the walk and through the revenue that you're raising that allows us to fund both of these kinds of initiatives, right? The more money we raise, the less hard choices we need to make between which of the two things that we need to do. I work a lot with the JDRF's International Board and our research staff, and I can tell you every month there's a meeting and a discussion about what are we going to fund in this next round of funding, and there's a constant tension between here's something that can improve life now, and here's something that's a longer shot that may take 20 years. Where do we want to allocate those resources? And it is not easy to decide, right? So what we're going to talk about with artificial pancreas is a near-term thing. So artificial pancreas, pump, a sensor, and a brain that integrates the three things. The great news on this front is that last September, the FDA approved the first commercially available artificial pancreas system from Medtronic, right? So how many people here use Medtronic systems or pumps? Got a number of people. So literally next month, Medtronic will start to ship their first 670Gs. These will be systems, it's a hybrid system that tweaks the basals to works to keep you from going too low and helps to pull you down if you've gone too high. When I got here a little bit ago, I was higher than I would have liked to have been, and that system would have automatically been pushing me back down as opposed to me having to take the time to push myself back down to where I want to be. So I was asked here at the beginning about my experience of artificial pancreas. I was fortunate in, not because I work at JDRF, but because my endocrinologist is a lead researcher on the artificial pancreas type work at the University of Virginia, and UVA was one of the first sites to run artificial pancreas trials in humans. And because I was her patient, she said, you should do this. And I was like, okay. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but fundamentally what I was getting into was the development of this life-saving technology that's going to change all of our lives. And I can tell you that every time I wore it, they would tell me, well, this time it's set to 100. We're going to try to wake you up around 100 in the morning, and we're going to see how we can do automating your control through the day. And I would wake up in the morning, and I would be at 99, or I'd be at 98, or I'd be at 101. And I'd be thinking, how can it do this? How can this technology, I'm wearing it anyway, right? Now it's just, the only thing we've added is some brains that are making decisions every couple of minutes about how to get my blood sugars where they should be. And it doesn't seem like it should be possible, but they automated my body and they made it do what it should do. And when you wake up morning after morning, like sometimes it would be set, say, for 100. Sometimes it would be set at 120. And when it was set at 120, every morning I would wake up and I was 118, 119, 120, 121. And I'd be like, there it is again, right? And every morning, I sort of started to get a little bit of an attitude where I'd feel like, wow, look at that. I'm at 124. It's a little high today, right? You know? So it felt really strange to realize that this technology could automate what to me has always been this incredibly complex thing called my body. And you would think, as an adult who's lived with this for quite some time, that I would have it kind of nailed and pretty much understand. But as we all know with type 1 diabetes, you can do the exact same thing day after day and get dramatically different results day after day, right? How well did you sleep last night? How much exercise did you get the day before? Did you eat all of the French fries or just some of the French fries, right? You know, whatever it is. And then imagine doing this to a 7-year-old, right? Where everything is in constant motion. It's really, really hard to achieve these kinds of outcomes. So what the artificial pancreas systems are doing is making these decisions every few minutes and tweaking your insulin up or pulling it down and delivering these amazing controls. So I have lots of ways I can go with this, but I'm going to do a couple of things. So we had a couple of other big announcements that have happened in the last few months. So how many people have used CGM? I know I only have one other type 1 in the room, right? There's a number of people, right? So you guys can do what I'm doing right now where I can literally touch my phone and see I'm at 123 and dropping. So I am coming down. That's a good thing. So that ability to look and see on a phone, that app, JDRF made that happen, right? I talk to parents all the time and I'm like, do you know where your kids are right now? And they know exactly what I mean, right? Where their blood sugar is, not exactly where they physically located that very moment. This is a very simple little app that JDRF felt was absolutely essential. We needed to have it on smartphones to help power the continued development of artificial pancreas technologies. And when we first went to the companies, they said, look, we're just launching our first systems. Smartphones are this brand new market. I mean, it was literally, we funded this in 2008. That's the year that the iPhone was first released, right? This technology isn't even 10 years old, even though we feel like we've been living with it for 20 years. And they kind of said to us, we don't see it. And JDRF was like, we see it and we need it. And this is something that needs to happen. So the fact that all of us can now use our phone and you guys can get alerts and know where your kids are at any given moment or have it on your watch is because of something that JDRF decided to fund that was short-term focused, changing lives, improving quality of life now, right? And this is a vital element of what becomes artificial pancreas systems. So a really cool thing happened with the FDA with continuous glucose sensing. So the FDA announced in December that we can now replace CGM for fingerstick with the Dexcom G5 sensor, right? I was with a mom up in Raleigh, and I live up in the mountains of Virginia. I have a Christmas tree farm, but in December, I was in Raleigh, and I was talking with a mom, and her son is now, I know him, he's a good kid. He's a 5-year-old kid, taller than I am, lives up in Washington, D.C. in his career. And I was telling her that based on this new decision, the next generation sensor that Dexcom brings out, or the one beyond that, will likely not require any finger sticks at all, even to calibrate. It'll be factory calibrated. You'll simply put it on, it will sync to the phone, and you'll be good to go, right? We now have replacement for finger stick on Dexcom CGM. So I made the observation to her, I guess in 5 or 6 years, we'll meet kids who've never had to prick their fingers. And then I just kept talking, and then I looked up, and she was crying, and I thought, oh no, what did I say, right? And I said to her, gosh, Jackie, I'm sorry. And she said, no. She said, I just had this memory of all those times I had to go into the bedroom in the middle of the night and wake Jamie up with a finger stick. And it just made me so happy to think about 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds not having to have their finger pricked in the middle of the night, right? It's a little small step, but it's a really big change in our quality of life, right? This is this idea of improving lives while driving advances that ultimately bring us cures. So that's a big advance. We also just had announced in January, so just last month, that Medicare will now cover CGM. So I won't reveal my age, but I'm easily within 10 years of reaching 65. And I was worried because the way it had stood, I am a person who's very dependent on continuous glucose sensing, and I was going to turn 65, and if I wanted to have CGM, I was going to have to buy it out of pocket. It is not something that Medicare would cover, right? We're trying to also grow the market signal here, so companies want to be developing new product and bringing it to market. And it's a very small market. Type 1 diabetes is a very small market, and there's not a lot of money chasing around in there. So it was great news when we also heard then from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid that they were going to start reimbursing for CGM. That's another big thing that JDRF worked very hard to do. And that's not even classic research. That's advocacy work, which is something that Jenny Costner can mention here when she gets up. So artificial pancreas, so all these suites of technology, and what I've been trying to build for you is this idea of it's now available, right? This isn't even anything anymore that we have to talk about as being experimental. Not only is it available, but the elements of it are becoming more and more available and fully reimbursed and covered by insurance. So this is one of JDRF's big objectives, and we've accomplished it. And there are next generation systems already in the wings moving forward. Right? I was out 3 weeks ago in San Francisco and went to Verily Life Sciences, which was what used to be Google, and got to see the Google Dexcom partnership on their one beyond the one that they're bringing forward next, which so the G7 sensor. It's as thick and about the size of a dime, right? It's meant to be very inexpensive, very easy to use. You basically put it on your body. It syncs right to the phone. No sensor calibration. 10-day wear at a time, and you're just good to go, right? And you can see pictures of this. This is not hard to find. If you Google it, you can actually see it. They have it next to an M&M for size comparison, right? And the M&M, frankly, looks gigantic. So it's pretty amazing technology. This stuff's only going to get better. Medtronic was the first group on market with an artificial pancreas, but you're going to see lots of other companies. So there's a group Type 0 at University of Virginia that is using the tandem pump and the Dexcom sensor. Bigfoot is another company that's out in California. Our previous CEO helped to found it. He has a son with type 1 diabetes. We just recently did an investment with them to help them keep going forward. And there's their own pump and the Dexcom sensor. And there's a number of other groups all around the country working on driving this forward. So within the next 2 years, you're going to start to have lots of choices. And so I'll share one more fun story. I was in another chapter, and there were 3 young ladies with type 1 diabetes. And I overheard sort of the following conversation. I don't like that kind of pump. I want to have this pump that has no tubing. Well, I like the one that looks like a cell phone. And I realized, wow, here we are. This is something that 10 years ago didn't even exist, and JDRF was the one who got it started by investing a lot of money in it. And now I'm getting to hear 3 young ladies in their 20s with type 1 diabetes sort of getting a little jaded about which version of it they wanted, right? That's kind of an amazing thing to be able to overhear. Made me smile and made me feel good, and frankly, all of you guys should be really proud. All the walks you've gone to, this is the kind of thing that we have made possible, and we really have changed people's lives. Let me stop for a second. I'll take any questions on artificial pancreas, and then I'll go to the stem cell question. So I got a question here, and then Stacey, I'll come to you.
Is it available for kids?
So the question is it available for kids? So the Medtronic system right now is not yet available for kids. They are going for that authorization. Those tests, those studies have already been done or are underway, and they're going to be submitting that data to the FDA, and I would expect that in pretty short order. I don't want to give a guess of exactly when, but in pretty short order, you're going to see this get pushed down for kids. The Medtronic system does have a lot of buttons on it. You interact with it, which means it probably won't be for little kids, toddlers. Like many people may be aware that like with the Omnipod system, because the controls don't reside with the child, it's a wireless control. You can put toddlers and even smaller before they're even walking onto the Omnipod system because they can't accidentally bolus themselves insulin. But so Medtronics won't probably be available for that age group. Sadly, yesterday I learned of a family that was diagnosed with a 9-month-old. So I always, when we talk about kids, that can be all the way down to little guys. I think in the next 6 months or so, I think you'd expect to see it become available for kids. And certainly all of the manufacturers intend to have it available for kids as well as adults. Stacey, your question?
All right, I'm jumping in because I ask a question here. It's a long question. I'm in the back. You don't hear anything but, people muttering, music playing, and that silverware clinking for a minute or two. But my question is asking Tom to explain what I get asked a lot. I've been asked a lot in the last few months, and that is, how can JDRF take credit for the artificial pancreas projects that private companies are working on? These are proprietary algorithms. So why does JDRF talk about their involvement in the artificial pancreas project? What does that mean? And, what did they have to do with it? So here's his answer.
So what Stacey is asking to just explain a little bit about how it is that JDRF played a role in making all this kind of come to pass. So I'll do a quick history. So 10 years ago, 2006, is when JDRF did its first grant to a consortium of institutions around the world. I want to say there were maybe 14 research groups at a number of different universities. So University of Virginia, University of California, Santa Barbara, Yale, Cambridge in the UK. I'm sure I'm totally blanking on others, but there were a number of institutions that started becoming what we called the Artificial Pancreas Consortium. And those groups fundamentally early on were focused on a couple of major questions. One was technology integration, so we had engineers. Can we get a pump to integrate with a CGM, to integrate with an algorithm, and start to deliver wireless control? When I first started doing these systems, I had to literally be hardwired into a laptop computer. So you can imagine how much fun it was trying to go to the bathroom at 11 o'clock at night, carrying your laptop and lots of wires down to the bathroom, right? So it was really not easy to use. Now, of course, we have Bluetooth, and we have wireless handheld computers called phones, and integrations become a lot easier. The other thing that everyone started working on was those complex control systems, right? If you're any engineers in the room, if I got an engineer in the room, they always understand this, but these are just complex control systems engineering. So we had to have engineers and mathematicians and computer scientists start to write the algorithms, the computer programs that would allow these things to work. And the great news is that we did, and it was successful, and lots of people started being tested. And what we then saw was corporations, particularly after 2012, as we saw the FDA, and there was a lot of hard work that JDRF did to get the FDA to issue new guidelines on what the commercialization of artificial pancreas would look like. We basically have invented this entire field. After that happened, the companies started to say, okay, now we understand what the roadmap looks like to start making product and selling it and making it available for people. So now we're going to enter into it. And so they started to license these algorithms that JDRF helped to develop. So University of Virginia, with their company Type Zero, now not theirs, it's a new company called Type Zero, that has licensed 20-plus different patents from the University of Virginia, many of which JDRF has a little bit of intellectual property on, that is helping to become their Type Zero system. Insulet Corporation has partnered with another one of our researchers and has licensed that algorithm to become the heart and brains of their system, right? Medtronic has their own people. They were able to take advantage of a lot of our research and do a lot of their own, but they had their own people and their own system. But we also had partnered with Medtronic to help develop their next generation sensors and their improved infusion sets. So this has been JDRF working with researchers, with industry, with government, the FDA, with insurers. We're moving the whole thing forward. And that's as quick a way as I can, particularly as I'm being given the sign that I have time is running short. Okay? So let's go to your stem cell question. So 10 plus years ago, there was a lot of debate. There were people saying that stem cell could become a really important way to help the type 1 community. The one thing that we are lacking, or at that time we were lacking, was an abundant, replenishable supply of new beta cells to put into the body. What we have always historically had to rely on were cadaver-based cells. So you had to wait till a person had died, so they didn't need the organ anymore, because you can't take a pancreas out of a person without doing a lot of damage. It's not an easy organ to get near. So we had to wait till a person had died, and then we had to take their beta cells and separate them from the pancreas, which is not easy. They're not all just sitting in one little cluster. They're strewn throughout the whole organ. So you basically had to kind of digest the organ and separate out the beta cells. It was crazy. As a result, it was very expensive, and globally, in the last year, there were fewer than 100 islet cell transplants done because there just aren't that enough cells available. And when you've got over 1 million of us in this country, it's going to take a long time to figure out how to get enough of us, all those cells, right? So stem cell has this really amazing power, or at least we believed it did, which is if you can take a stem cell and figure out how to make it turn into a stem cell has the potential to become any other cell in the body. So if we could figure out the user manual, the instructions for guiding that pathway, and take a beta cell or a stem cell and differentiate it all the way down to a fully operational beta cell, then we would have come up with this sort of idea of a replenishable source. And stem cells have another wonderful thing. They're kind of the fountain of youth. If you keep them happy and you know how to do it properly, they will live forever and just keep producing more cells for you. They just, every 24 hours, 48 hours, they double in number, right? So I'm making this sound simple, but it's not, right? This is really, really hard science. A number of researchers all around the globe that worked on this for JDRF. There's an amazing researcher, Matthias Hebrock, at University of California in San Francisco. There's another researcher at University of British Columbia, Vancouver, Tim Kiefer. There's another guy, Doug Melton, who has 2 children with type 1 diabetes at Harvard. And we funded them to do this kind of work. And I would see Doug and others, and I would say, hey, guys, how's it going? And it would be maybe another 2 years later, they'd say, well, we've got a lot more of that instruction book figured out. About 2 years ago, we were able to announce to the world, happily, that we had figured it all out. We now have the complete roadmap for how you can take a stem cell and mature it all the way to a full beta cell. Right? That's a huge breakthrough moment for all of us because it implied that for the first time we were going to start to have an endlessly available supply of new beta cells. Now, we still have to tackle the immune problem, the autoimmune system where the body revs up and destroys beta cells. But it's basically the way we see it are 2 major gates we have to get through. One is an endlessly renewable supply of new beta cells, and 10 years ago it didn't exist, and nobody knew how to do it. And the other was how to get the immune system to behave itself, to leave those cells alone once we put new ones in. The great news is one of those things has now been fully overcome. We now have the ability to grow new beta cells. And there's a number of researchers all around the globe who have figured out multiple ways to do it. So we now those cells are rapidly advancing towards testing in people. In fact, some have been tested in people in encapsulation devices, which is another project. We still have to figure out the immune attack. And we have some really great ways of coming at that. And hopefully within the next 5 years or more, we'll hear some breakthroughs in that area. But the idea being then that we're going to be able to bring these things together. So it would be a 1-2 treatment. First, you would be given some intervention, I won't even say what it might be right this minute, that would tweak the immune system back to behaving well. And then we would add in those new beta cells that we grew, because once the body had decided not to attack and destroy those cells, okay, great, we just grew you some new ones. We took some skin cells, regressed them back to embryonic stem cell state, and then brought them back forward as new beta cells for you. Here you go. We just infuse them into your body, turn the key, you're done. You're back with a full cure. So where we are in that work right now is we're fully understanding what those newly grown beta cells are like. So it's called characterizing them. Do they, in fact, behave exactly the way we want them to in all circumstances? What is their ultimate fate in the body? How long do they live? Are they shorter lived than others? Or do they live just as long as regular beta cells? A lot of characterizing them, understanding them, testing them in primates, getting ready to start testing them in human beings. Some of them in a certain circumstance, encapsulation, which is a whole other thing that I won't have time to go into right now, but we can talk later if you want to talk with me about it. We already have been doing some testing in people, and we see these cells behave in people the way we would want to. They have matured and start to develop inside an encapsulated device, but so it's just special, and behave and start to mature and produce insulin in response to glucose. So the stem cell research has begun to change our lives. It's not yet at a point where I can tell you can go and buy it, and I can't fully paint for you that picture, but it's added a whole new tool to our toolbox of how we're going to end up being able to fully cure type 1 diabetes. and I'm probably about out of time. I'll take one quick minute. It's the prerogative of being the guy with the microphone. So let me just paint a picture for you, because I think the stem cell work and what I was just describing starts to hint at how you could get to a full cure. And obviously it's why JDRF has been funding this research, and frankly took a lot of heat for having decided to fund this area of research 15 years ago. So there's an amazing set of researchers at University of California, San Francisco, and they are immunologists. And they were looking at some work that was being done in the field of cancer research. So there's these cells called T cells, right? We've all heard of T cells that can attack and destroy the beta cells, or if you haven't, that's the cell with T attack, or I won't go into too much more detail there. And the T just stands for thymus. They're taught in the thymus, they come out of the thymus, and they are what are involved with other cells in attacking and destroying the beta cells. These researchers were looking at work that was being done in cancer. And in cancer, the problem is there aren't enough of those attack cells. The tumor has this ability to kind of be invisible, and it hides from the attack cells. So the immune system can't see them, so it can't grow up a lot of them. So there aren't a whole bunch of T cells there available to attack and destroy the tumor. But there's always a few. So let's say you need 1 trillion cells to attack and destroy a tumor, but maybe the body has only got 25. And that's simply not enough to overwhelm the tumor and just destroy it so the cancer wins. But there were some researchers that said, well, what if we could take those 25 cells that had figured it out, pull them out of the body, and because we understand how to cause cells to replicate, what if we could grow them up to 1 trillion of them and reinfuse your own cells, just grown up to a larger number, back into the body? Would they attack and destroy the tumor? And the answer turns out to be yes. And this is one of the reasons why there's a lot of excitement in the field of cancer research, because it implies that we can now take the body's own system, rev it up, and attack tumors that are growing in the body. This is still early work, but it's very encouraging. So a group of our immunologists working on type 1 said, well, could we take the cells that are meant to keep the peace, the regulatory cells, that are also T cells, that are too few in number and are not able to keep the peace so that the cells run amok and attack and destroy our beta cells? Could we do the opposite? Could we spin up the regulatory cells, reinfuse them back into the body, and see the immune system come back into balance? So we did that in 16 patients out in the San Francisco area. They were all new onset, so people who had just been diagnosed. We took their regulatory cells, boosted them way up, infused them back into the body, and in those 16 people, we saw their immune system come back into balance. And wherever they were in that onset process, they kind of just stopped. So if they were only needing 5 units of insulin, that's all they've needed, and they haven't gone on to need more. If they were in the honeymoon phase, it just sort of suspended them in the honeymoon phase. We don't know yet how long that is going to last, but we have seen a really interesting development there. And so you're seeing this now go into a phase 2 trial where a lot more people will be tested. But just take a hypothetical for me, and this is why I took a minute to do this with you. So let's combine that work. If we have those those stem cells that can be matured into being fully mature beta cells for you, and we can take your own cells and grow them up and infuse them into you and get your immune system back into balance, we could do those two things together, a combination treatment, right, where we rebalance your immune system first, get you back into a good spot, and then we're like, okay, now you're balanced again, give you back your own beta cells, and suddenly you'd be living with something that would feel a lot like a cure. Does it last for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? I don't know, but I'll take it for however long it would last, right? So anyway, that's me wrapping up. There's a lot of reasons, short-term, mid-term, long-term, to be excited. Together, going to those walks, we are raising the money that's going to change the future. And together, we're all going to create that world without type 1 diabetes. And thanks for having me here today.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
I'll link up more from Tom about JDRF and other stuff that he's talking about, and maybe some past interviews with him as well. I do have one bone to pick with him. He said something in there, I think, about Medtronic and maybe Tandem and Animas having too many buttons for kids or being too hard to operate, so Omnipod is better for little kids. Look, you have to find the pump that works best for you. But I was kind of surprised to hear him say that because, we've used Animas, which has buttons, since age 2. You just lock the pump or you zip it in a little pouch and you clip that shut or something. I mean, truly, kids get used to whatever pump you put them on. So I disagree with him on that one. And, Animas is approved down to age 2. And, I respect Tom a lot. I'm not quite sure what that was all about. But, if you're curious about limitations on pumps, definitely talk to your educator or your endocrinologist. And if you're looking for a pump, if you're in the market, make sure that you definitely touch each one, go see them. It's a big decision. So just wanted to say that. Also, funny story about Tom, and I've told this before, but when I met him 5 years ago for the first time, he was one of the first people I met who was wearing a Dexcom. And in my head, a Dexcom was, now remember, a lot of this was before social media. And when you think about 6 years ago, people were not wearing CGM in the numbers that they are right now. So forgive me for my ignorance. But I thought the Dexcom was attached to something, a receiver, I don't know, like a tubed pump, right? That it would be attached to something else. It would go on your body and then you'd wear something else on your waist. And when I asked Tom about it, he was appalled. I mean, he was so funny and he didn't take off his shirt, but he ripped up his shirt. He rolled up his sleeve. He took his arm out of the sleeve and he showed me the Omnipod that he wears and he showed me the Dexcom as well. And it was mind blowing to me just to see how small it is, and it's smaller now. I had no idea what a Dexcom was. So I'll always remember that. About Tom. We were at a conference and it was in the hallway and he just wanted to show me and he was so open about it. It was great. All right. So moving on, my community connection this week. Late last year, I went to a JDRF walk in Naples, Florida, and I had some really fun families. Michelle Lang has 2 teenage boys with type 1. She had these really cool sneakers on. A friend made them for her. They had, the JDRF sneaker logo, all this cool stuff on them. Caught my eye. So I walked over and talked to her for just a few minutes. I apologize. It was very windy. So, you'll be able to hear this just fine. But, man, it was a very windy day. But Michelle has experience with TrialNet. And this is a very long-time walk family, very well known in the Naples area. It was really nice to talk to her.
My oldest, Joseph, he was 11 when he was diagnosed in 2010. And soon after, we had the whole family tested through TrialNet. And unfortunately, my youngest child, Andrew, who was 9 at the time, was found to have 4 out of the 4 autoantibodies that are known to cause diabetes. So they did tell us that he would eventually develop it. We did some research studies with him over the years, but ultimately 3 years later, he was diagnosed at age 12. So I do have 2 teenage boys now, age 15 and 17, with type 1. I will say that obviously the initial diagnosis of my oldest was pretty awful and life-altering for our family. However, you're just kind of forced into this life and you just do what you have to do to survive. On the other hand, knowing what was in store for my other child, it was devastating. And it was, I don't want to say to families not to do TrialNet because I think the research is so important, but it was tough, I'm not going to lie, knowing and anticipating that he was going to get it. We did do some research studies through TrialNet. It was called the oral insulin pill that was supposed to help delay the onset, but it just 3 years later, he got it. But it's also good to know what the signs and symptoms are, so we were prepared.
I really appreciate your honesty, and I have to say thank you because your family has personally helped with research that hopefully we will see wonderful things out of. But man, that's tough. Thank you so much for sharing that part of your story.
Absolutely.
Tell me about your team. This used to be Average Joe.
We used to be called the Average Joes because my oldest son's name is Joe, and that was the initial team name. And then when my other son was diagnosed, we said, well, we have to change the name. It can't be Average Joes anymore, so we changed it to Average Bros. So now we're the Average Bros. And so we've been walking. This is our 6th year at the walk. And, you know, we're happy to be here and mingle with the other families and support one another and support JDRF.
Is it still a positive event for you? I know the first couple of walks can be incredibly invigorating for families and you have a real sense of community. Do you still feel that way, or is it more, oh, we got to come back?
No, I still feel that way. It's, you know, it's just once a year, and it's just a great event. The community really comes together, and we've been very blessed throughout the years to have so many family and friends support us.
It's okay. It's okay. It's so genuine. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have to stop here, jump in for just a second, because, you know, Michelle got pretty emotional right there. And this happens to me all the time at walks. I don't know about you, but Michelle started crying. I started crying. You know, you really can't hear anything. You can't hear us crying because the wind is whipping and we're trying not to cry. And but I just wanted to take a moment and let you know what was going on rather than listen to nothing for 15 to 20 seconds. And we pick it up just a few moments later.
But is it, if you don't mind, is it about you seem to get overwhelmed thinking about all the people that have been there for you. You must have some awesome friends.
We really do. The first year we had 120 walkers on our team. It was amazing. And, you know, we still have maybe not quite that many, but we still raise about $10,000 every year for the walk, which is usually we're the top team, you know, and as far as fundraising goes. And we usually have, you know, quite a few walkers. So we're just blessed to have a great support system.
How are your boys doing? Is he going to college next year?
My oldest is actually not here today, unfortunately, but he is at his official visit to the college that has offered him a full scholarship to play football.
Wow, congratulations!
So, you know, it's bittersweet, but we're happy that he, you know, he's had the opportunity that he's being given, and obviously, you know, it's exciting for him to be there today. And
obviously, diabetes didn't quite stop him from playing
absolutely
sports.
Absolutely not. He's powered through and he's worked really hard. So
wonderful.
Yes.
How about that? So we're going to be watching for her son on the football field and her family at the walks. And it's so cool. You know, the Average Bros, anything but average. Really cool folks, and I'm so lucky. You know, Animus had sent me to Naples to do some work there for the walk. It was fantastic to just get down there, and it was December, and it was really warm, so that was fun too. Just meet some cool people. All right, this was a long show. Thank you for staying with the whole thing. I really appreciate it. Lots more to come in the weeks to come. And if you'd like to suggest a guest or you have some feedback, please let me know. Stacey at diabetes-connections.com, Stacey. Or you can just ping me on social media. I'm on Facebook and Twitter as Stacey Sims, Facebook and Twitter as Diabetes Connections, and of course the website. So we're pretty easy to find. Love to hear from you. And wherever you listen, if you wouldn't mind sharing this with a friend, let them know about the podcast if they are touched by type 1 diabetes. And please subscribe if you're listening on a podcast app. Thank you so much for joining me. You know, I know your time is very valuable, and I appreciate that you're spending some of it with me. That's not something I take lightly. So thank you very much. I'm Stacey Sims, and I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.